We just got some brand new reporting tonight, which confirms what we have been suspecting for quite some time, that the Trump campaign is panicking over the race against Vice President Kamala Harris. They're not confident. And now, via this new reporting, local Republicans in swing states around the country are sounding the alarm that the Trump campaign is not doing enough, that they're not investing in these states enough, and that it's very possible, if not likely, that Donald Trump will lose these states. So I'm going to show you this reporting. We'll talk about it a little bit. But before I do so, make sure to subscribe down below. It goes a really long way. It helps the channel a lot. But now, let's dive right in. So we have some reporting from journalist Hugo Lowell. He works at The Guardian, among other news agencies, and he writes, new local Republican officials are raising the alarm that the Trump campaign's ground game in battleground states is similar in size to a midterm, and the hiring spree by PACs may be coming too late. Now, that is a scathing assessment of the Trump campaign, but every single piece of data points us to that conclusion. And there's an article that corresponds with that reporting. Republican officials are raising the alarm that Donald Trump's campaign has invested far fewer resources for its voter turnout operation in battleground states than previous presidential election races, and attempts to bridge the gap with PACs have come too late. Now, you'd think that in this really important election, that Donald Trump and his campaign would be investing like tenfold in these swing states, more than they did in 2020. But that's not the reality. And we'll talk about why that's not the reality in just a second, but let's continue. The Republican National Committee once envisioned an extensive field operation for the 2024 election, including having about 90 staffers in the must-win state of Pennsylvania. But the Trump campaign scrapped those plans when it took over the RNC in March, redirecting the focus on field operations to combating supposed voter fraud and pursuing a twin voter turnout strategy of relying on several PACs and ardent Trump volunteers. Now, that's a pretty bad strategy. I mean, look, I've described Donald Trump as someone who continues to shoot himself in the foot, and that seems to be the case here once again. Like, the Republicans having Donald Trump and his family basically take over the RNC was the worst move ever. The RNC was on track to have, as it said, 90 staffers in the must-win state of Pennsylvania, the state that's likely going to tip this election one way or another, having tens of field offices in the state of Pennsylvania. That was the RNC's vision. No longer, because now you have Laura Trump at the helm, with Donald Trump basically controlling it, putting more money into fraud lawyers for non-existent fraud than anything else. The result has been the Trump campaign has put fewer resources into its ground game in the battleground states, according to people familiar with the matter. And the Republican officials have said that the Trump operation is more comparable in size to a midterm cycle than a presidential. In response to reporting for this story, the Trump campaign said their field operation is larger than the RNC's in 2022, which had 350 staffers in battleground states and 50 in Pennsylvania, according to RNC midterm data. Still, the Trump campaign appears to be dwarfed by the Harris operation, which is understood to have roughly 375 staffers in Pennsylvania alone, after Democrats spent years building up its voter turnout efforts in the state that could decide this election. So, it's not even close. Like, the numbers are just not even comparable to the Harris campaign and what they're doing in Pennsylvania, what they're doing in other swing states. It's just not even close. The Harris campaign is demolishing the Trump campaign on the ground, not only in Pennsylvania but in swing states around the country. Like that Biden campaign and then now the Harris campaign, but the two campaigns kind of being one, have had field offices opened in these swing states for months now. Like, well over probably around a year, maybe 8 months ago, they started opening field offices. They've been going in. They've been having this really solid ground operation in these states to get voters out to vote. Republicans have not been doing that because they've been too focused on funding Donald Trump's legal cases or funding the supposed fraud. But anyway, the article continues. The Trump campaign also dismissed criticism about its presence, arguing it ultimately does not matter so long as their Trump Force 47 captains, that's a real operation, and the PACs together knock on enough doors of low propensity Trump voters, especially in rural areas. It's not a great strategy, is that, low propensity voters are people who don't really vote. They don't turn out all that often. So basically, hinging your election prospects on people who don't vote, you can kind of see where I'm going with this. that the last contention at least is true. The RNC used to focus on suburban areas where they could hit more doors in a single day than in rural areas, which they instead just targeted with blitz of mail ads. But the PACs, which are supposed to be bridging the gap, have been slow to spool up, according to people with direct access to data for groups like America PAC, Turnout for America, Turning Point Action, and America First Works. These are all Trump-aligned PACs. They've only started to hire at a rapid clip in recent weeks, the people said, meaning that they're reaching Trump supporters late in the cycle when it often takes repeated voter contacts to get them to return a ballot. So these are things, as we mentioned, the ground game Democrats have been building up for a long time now, like doing the work, getting in these neighborhoods, knocking on doors, creating a sophisticated voting outreach operation. The Trump campaign is just starting now. Now, we are less than 60 days away from the election. The Democrats have been doing it for years. The Republicans are starting now. And I want to emphasize that this does not mean that Kamala Harris is automatically going to win the election and that we should just give up. This means we go harder. This means we go full speed ahead and ensure a victory, not just say, well, it's going to happen this way. Not at all. This election is going to be close. It's going to come down to the wire. We got to do everything we can to make sure that happens. The situation means that not only is the size of the former Trump operation particularly small for the 2024 election, but the door knockers and canvassers recruited by the PACs might be less effective compared to previous presidential cycles. At least part of the reason why the Trump campaign has been slow to the ground game this cycle is because of the messy situation at the RNC. When the Trump campaign took over the RNC, it implemented a hiring freeze apart from asking its staff to this is crazy. To summarily fired to reapply for roles. Trump was also more interested in supposed mass voter fraud, the employee said, diverting resources to election integrity efforts. But after Kamala Harris became the nominee and drew roughly level in key polls following Biden's withdrawal, it became clear the unglamorous efforts to convince likely voters to cast a ballot could make a critical difference in this close election. So, kind of what we talked about, the Trump campaign is more interested in fighting fraud and paying for Donald Trump's legal cases, paying for his lawyers, that they're not actually going to put that money into a ground game, or they haven't, at least up until this point. And as I mentioned earlier, I think there's a reason for this. I think there's a huge reason why Kamala Harris's campaign is much bigger, much more sophisticated, and Trump's campaign has been kind of dwarfed. Doesn't really have a presence in key swing states. They're quite a small campaign, and I think it's very simple. It's not some complex theory or anything. It's just pretty much straightforward that Kamala Harris is raising a lot more money than Donald Trump. The Harris campaign raised $361 million in August alone, more than double Trump's fundraising. Trump's team announced Wednesday it brought in $130 million over the same period. $130 million for Trump, $361 million for Kamala Harris. Now, that difference in resources gives Kamala Harris a huge advantage in actually putting those resources to work, hiring people, getting staffers, opening up campaign offices, and all that stuff. Kamala Harris has the advantage in resources, in funding, which is crucial. It's crucial that she has that. And that's why the campaigns are just on two different levels. Like Kamala Harris is up here, Donald Trump's campaign is down here. The Kamala Harris campaign actually has an operation, something that they're doing. The Donald Trump campaign, well, they don't. They're getting outworked, outspent, out-fundraised. It's just not comparable. So the Republicans in all these swing states, and even those Republicans on Trump's campaign, are in full-blown panic mode right now. We can see it in the data. It's not rocket science. It would be amazing to be a fly on the wall in some of these meetings with Donald Trump when they're giving him these updates, because he's probably furious. And the campaign is losing it right now. They started too late. They were so focused on Trump's legal cases and so focused on investing money in that they completely forgot about, the voters, the most important thing in this election. It's remarkable. It's remarkable how incompetent they are over at the Trump campaign. So anyway, I just wanted to bring this story to your attention. I think it's just fascinating that this is the difference in the two campaigns. But I will leave the video there. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here. If you did enjoy, make sure to subscribe down below and leave a like on the video. And of course, comment down below and let me know what you think about all this and what you think about this story. I'm excited to hear from you. But I will leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day.